Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Iggy's Toy Parade and Soldier Review. Today we're going to talk about 70 millimeter Cowboys from the Auburn Rubber Company. Now, who is the Auburn Rubber Company? I'm sure many of you don't know who that is because they went out of business in 1969. The Auburn Rubber Company was established in 1913, and initially they were producing tires and inner tubes for tires. Then they went to producing rubber soles for shoes, and in 1935 they began producing inexpensive toys. You could find their toys in the 50s and 60s in the toy area or toy aisle of Woolworths until 1969. What you see here is a collection of the Auburn Cowboys, plus an Auburn cabin and an Auburn wagon, a buckboard wagon. Now, what we have here is, I think, an interesting collection of figures. One, in that 70 millimeter is not a common size for toy soldiers or toy figurines. Most kids tend to gravitate towards the 154. So you might say, well, what's the difference between a 54 millimeter and a 70? I've got a Marx figure here. I'll put him next to this guy right here so you can get a size comparison. So what it looks like is the rifleman and his son. You can see here there's quite a difference in the size there. Let me remove this Marx figure now. Now, what I like about these Auburn figures is that they have some poses that I think are unique and fun and interesting. Primarily, we have some scenes that you just generally don't see too often. And one of them being the guy ringing the bell. Let me see. I point him out to you. This guy right here. He's ringing the bell, let the cowhands know it's time for their beans. Do you remember Blazing Saddles when I don't need to go into that, but that was a funny scene. Anyway, there's a fellow playing the guitar, like wannabe Elvis or perhaps Ricky Nelson. And then we have two cowboys sitting by the campfire. Now, you'll notice with this figure here, he's got a ring hand, and the reason for that is they also produced accessories for these figures, such as a frying pan, which would fit into his hand, and they also had a fire that was, I believe, molded in a green or red plastic. And then we have a fellow drinking his coffee. So those are some of the more unusual poses. Perhaps a typical pose would be this one here, the gunslinger or the sheriff, depending on if he's got a badge or not. I can't see. I don't see a badge, so he's a gunslinger. And another traditional type pose, cowboy with a rope. And this figure here is interesting in that it's like a two-part piece. I'm missing the steer. This fella is actually wrestling a steer to the ground so that they can take a branding iron and mark it with their brand. And he holds on to the tip of the steer's horn here and the other horn here. So he's like twisting its neck to get it to go to ground. They call that bulldogging, I think. Should ask Cowboy Carl. He would know exactly what that is. We also have a figure branding a calf that's been tied. You see it's been tied there. And it's screaming out in pain, as you can see there, as any of us would if encountering a similar situation. In the background is the Auburn Rubber Company cabin. and it's made out of a vinyl material. Then we have a buckboard wagon. Now, all the buckboards were molded in red and had yellow wheels, and there was 3 types of wagons that they made. One wagon was molded with a man sitting in the seat here, right here, and then there was the one that you see in front of you. Then the third one was the almost identical to this, except instead of the man or being empty, it had a dog lying down and sleeping on the seat. They also made fencing, and I'll show you that. Now, this fencing is inadequate for what they've done here. It's not to scale, and it's very obvious. What I'm going to do is set up a piece of this fencing and compare it to a horse, which I have here. And you can see immediately that the horse could just step right over that fence. If you had fencing on your ranch like that, you'd have no animals. Unless you had tortoises and rabbits. I don't know what kind of ranch that would be. So why don't we take a look at what the Marx Western fencing looked like. We saw the Cowboy compared to the Auburn Rubber Company Cowboy. So here's some Western fencing by Marx Toys, and you can see it's a better size. However, for livestock, or especially horses, it would probably be better served if it was up about this high, where the horse can put his head and neck over the fence, but not the rest of his body. All right, well, let's take a look at the buckboard wagon and then compare it to a Marx wagon. So I'm going to remove the fencing. And this is a Marx, a reproduction Marx wagon that I took the canvas top off to make it more comparable to the buckboard style. And you'll notice that it's much smaller than the Auburn rubber. And you'll also notice immediately that the detailing in the harness and the traces, I guess they call that, is much better, because on here it's non-existent. It just looks like a bareback horse. Now, Auburn Rubber did do something that I thought was very interesting, and I had not seen it in any other video. And I'm going to move this Marx wagon out of the way a little bit. Hopefully you'll be able to see it. If you look at his hooves, I wonder if that was named after President Hoover. At least the vacuum was. Not really. He has like a Belgium, he looks like a Belgium workhorse, or like a Clydesdale. Those horses were very large. And I have a horseshoe from a plow horse, and it's gigantic compared to a horse that people ride for pleasure. The workhorse shoe is gigantic. It's just really big. Anyway, this particular wagon was in perfect condition when I got it. However, because of being in storage for many years, it's become sort of disshapen. Is that a word? Unshapen? Misshapen. It's misshapen. That's the word I was looking for. Okay, now let's move this over here and we'll take a look at the cabin. Now, the cabin is really nice. There's not a whole lot in the way of cabins available out there. I know that Ideal Toys made something they called a trading post, which was almost the same size as this. And then there's a few other cabins. The ones made by Marx Toys were made of tin, so they're not comparable to this. But it's a nice cabin. It has a fireplace, has nice details on the exterior. There is no back wall to the cabin, so you can put your figures in more easily. Give you a little side view there. All right, guys, that's it for Auburn Toys Cowboys, 70 millimeter Cowboys. And there's one detail that I wanted to share with you that was, I don't know, somewhat interesting, if not amusing. In 1959, apparently and allegedly, the mob bought the toy concern from Auburn, and they moved it to Deming, New Mexico, and that's where it stayed until they went out of business in 1969. If any of you are old enough to remember Woolworths, they had tons of Auburn rubber toys. They had tractors and dirt movers and cars and hot rods, and more importantly to many of us toy soldier collectors, they had the tanks and trucks and jeeps and half tracks and whatnot. Plus, they also made soldiers. Anyway, that's all I got for you this time. I want to thank you for coming along. For those of you who have subscribed, thank you for enlisting. Don't forget to smack the notification bell. And I'll be talking to you guys soon. Thank you for getting Iggy with it. Bye, guys. Thank you.